Lastly, again, a reminder that when this event is over, we would love to see you all in the Expo Hall. And with that, Brady will introduce our next speaker.
And we're lucky to have with us tonight the founder and CEO of O'Reilly. Please welcome Tim.
Thank you very much for coming here. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something I started calling Web Meets World. And it has a couple of different meanings. I'm going to focus on one of them today. And that is, the real world that's starting to intrude on all of us and making us think, what do we do next? So, let me just start. There was a column by Dan Lyons that came into prominence as Fake Steve Jobs, but is now just a regular Newsweek columnist. And he ended his column about the current financial troubles affecting the startup economy, and he said, Web 2.0, is it becoming Web 2.over? And it's a question that I imagine a lot of you might be asking, certainly as I've been doing interviews with press. That's one of the questions that they're all asking. And I answered, wait a minute, think about the deep trends behind Web 2.0. The internet becoming a platform for software development, the power of the web to harness collective intelligence, new database-backed applications that really show the power of databases that grow through increasing returns of user participation and network effects. Software above the level of a single device, that is, software that literally is interpenetrating our lives more and more through the devices we carry. Software as a service. These are not going away. They're not short-term trends. They're not going to be affected by the ups and downs of financial markets. Do you really think that we're done yet with exploiting this huge change to the network as platform? I don't. So that's sort of a first order answer to that question. But there's a second order answer. There will be winners and losers. Certainly there'll be some big winners in any business that helps to save money. Cloud computing, software as a service applications like Google Apps. Already you see a lot of momentum towards free applications. This is going to continue. Of course, so that's actually very helpful for Web 2.0. Although the downside is some of those applications are already taken by the big guys. And I'll be quite honest with you, I've actually predicted for a long time that we were entering a period of consolidation in Web 2.0 applications. If you look at the history of technology, every time there's a new platform, there's an explosion. There's a literal explosion of companies that deliver goods, services, new ideas in that new marketplace, and most of them don't survive. So when people have said, well, gosh, what's going to happen in this financial downturn? I say, well, it's probably going to accelerate the winnowing process that was going to happen anyway. So much of what I've thought about Web 2.0 and open source has really come from studying the history of the IBM personal computer. And I'm old enough, sad to say, to remember, what was happening in the early 80s. There were thousands of PC software companies. And by the early 90s, there were only a few. And, Microsoft basically took over the world, and there were some big roll-up plays. Companies like Computer Associates and Symantec that bought lots and lots of little companies and became big through accretion. And there were a few other winners, on both the hardware and the software side. But, that Precambrian explosion of PC startups didn't go on forever. And Web 2.0 startups, in that sense, are not going to go on forever. But startups didn't end. And there were new opportunities. New opportunities came along with the web. And so I think we have to really think about where we're going. And I really do think there's going to be some big winners, let's say, continuing with the trend. And I also want to point out that something that happened in the dot-com bust back in 2001. One company that I was very close to, Blogger.com. We were a founding investor in Evan Williams' company. Evan used to work for me at O'Reilly. And we were on the board, and we eventually helped Evan sell the company to Google. But in the low point for Blogger, it was down to Evan, sleeping, under his desk. One guy keeping his dream alive. And there may be startups that will survive that way. Because, hey, the cheap, easy venture capital isn't there, but you believe so passionately in what you're doing that you want to make it stick. And that's actually a good time for entrepreneurs in a lot of ways. The losers are going to be Me Too startups, fueled by easy money, and the venture capitalists who invested in them. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking a little differently. I used this, covered the New York Times for about a month ago in my talk in Web Expo in New York. Because it was great because it had sort of the first warning signs of these big financial shocks we've seen, but it also had news of the hurricane in Galveston, which was a great reminder of natural disasters and some of the possible effects of climate change. And you go, boy, this is pretty serious news. And you have to start saying, gosh, have we been living in a bit of a bubble in the technology world? And I don't mean an investment bubble, I just mean a reality bubble. We've got the worst income equality in modern culture since the Gilded Age of the 1920s. We've got oil price shocks, we've got global warming, we've got decline in science, literacy, and education, we've got water scarcity looming, we've got exotic diseases cropping up every few years. You guys have already forgotten about SARS and bird flu, but the next one's going to come around the corner soon, and then we'll be, once again, afraid of what's happening. We've got aging populations. Soaring health costs. We've got a decline in economic competitiveness, and we've got dysfunctional political systems. These are real and serious problems. Meanwhile, our best and brightest are working on things like this. And maybe even cool applications like this. I have to say, the iPind is a cool application because it sort of shows off this idea of what we can do with sensors, and I do think that that's one of the important trends for the future that you should all be paying attention to. We are moving into a world in which computing is becoming ubiquitous and driven by, not just by people typing on keyboards, but by applications that literally can understand and respond to their environment. I think there's going to be some amazing new applications possible, particularly when you think about the data that's generated by things like location. When your phone knows where you are, when your camera can start to build 3D models based on just the pictures you take. There's some pretty interesting things happening. But it's tough to predict the future. We have Ray Kurzweil telling us that the singularity is near. Technology is going to progress so